All right, so with President Joe Biden seeming to have absolutely no plan whatsoever to push back against Senator Joe Manchin tanking the possibility of investing in climate change or raising taxes on the wealthy, it seems as though there's a little bit of a revolt happening within the establishment of the Democratic Party and even within Biden's own staff. So here from Lever News, they say Biden's staff sounds the climate alarm about Biden. A letter obtained by the Lever shows the call for climate action is now coming from within inside the administration. So I did see a tweet here from one of the congressional staffers participating in this. I believe that this guy works for, Cory Bush's campaign. And he said, "We staffers of the U.S. Congress are peacefully sitting in on Senator Schumer's office to demand Democrats pass climate justice policy this year. We are putting our bodies on the line because we have no other choice." And he says, "Follow along for updates from the inside." So credit to them for doing this. Obviously, with something as big of an issue as climate change, the single greatest threat, not just to the United States, but to the future habitability of the planet. Obviously, this is going to take an all hands-on-deck approach, so credit to them for putting their jobs on the line and being willing to confront some of the blockades to progress on climate legislation. But immediately I noticed this response down here, and granted, this is just some random person, but this is a response that you could hear from, I think, everyday normal liberals within the Democratic Party who just give knee-jerk reactionary defenses for the inaction of the Democratic Party. So I wanted to go ahead and read this. They said, "Why not sit in at Senator McConnell's office? It's Republicans blocking climate justice policy. Democrats are our allies in climate justice. Republicans are the ones you need to put pressure on. Only through unity will we succeed. You should not need to be told this." So, I mean, this had a substantial amount of support in the responses here, but this is something that you could hear from, average normie liberal voters within the Democratic Party, but it's entirely bullshit because, yes, obviously, everybody understands that Republicans are opposed to making investments in climate change, but Mitch McConnell is not the leader of the Senate right now, okay? You have Chuck Schumer as the leader of the Senate. You have Nancy Pelosi as the leader of the House. You have Joe Biden as the president of the United States. So all three chambers are currently under control of the Democratic Party, and it is Democratic senators like Joe Manchin who are preventing climate action from actually being taken. So you can go and whine about Republican opposition to this, but that's taken for granted. It's taken as something that is understood by everybody, and you're not going to get anywhere by trying to go and confront Mitch McConnell on climate investments. Okay, they're completely hollow ghouls. You have to use this opportunity right now in order to force people like Joe Manchin or other Democratic holdouts into line so that they will get in favor of this legislation. There's no other route here that's going to convince these massively corrupted Republicans to fall in line on investing in climate change. And again, it's important to understand the situation that we're in right now. This could potentially be the single last chance that Democrats have before the midterms to adequately invest in climate change. And if Republicans take control in the midterms, if they win in 2024, then we are completely fucked in regards to the, again, the single greatest issue facing the planet. But a little bit more details on what the fuck is going on within the Biden administration and these congressional staffers here from Lever News. They say President Joe Biden's surrender on climate policy amid the intensifying crisis has prompted his own agency experts to sound a rare public alarm about their boss's retreat, according to a letter being circulated throughout the administration and Capitol Hill. The letter sent to Biden and Chuck Schumer, provided to the Lever by a House Democratic staffer, is initialed by 165 staffers at federal health and environmental agencies and at 75 congressional offices. They are demanding the president use more aggressive tactics to pass his long-promised climate agenda through the Senate. And they got a quote here saying, "President Biden, you have an exigent responsibility to reduce suffering all over the world and the power and skills to do so, but time is running out," says the letter, which is now being circulated throughout the administration for more signatures. And it continues saying, "You are the president of the United States of America at a pivotal moment in the history of the world. All that we ask is that you do everything in your power. We've done our part. We implore you to do yours." And they give a little bit more specifics here coming up on exactly what they want to see Biden do. But they say Mark Levin was referring to Senator Joe Manchin once again proclaiming that he was walking away from negotiations on the $375 billion investment in clean energy tax credits, which in and of itself, $375 billion. Okay, again, I understand that I'm making the same points over and over and over again, but that's just because the fundamental reality reality of this is not changing. But $375 billion, really, that's the best that we can come up with to invest in climate change, investments that will 100% pay for themselves over time in mitigating the destructive costs of inaction on climate change, investments that will potentially allow the United States to lead the world in the future of energy. I mean, these investments are completely pathetic. We're talking about $375 billion stretched over a number of years versus, what we're investing in our military budget on an annual basis, damn near $1 trillion at this point going into the military, which is, oh, by the way, one of, if not the single greatest polluters in the entire world right now. So, I mean, relative to what our priorities are, what they're able to pass legislation for, what they're able to spend money for and find money for is, completely ridiculous. Their priorities are absolutely dog shit. And, even this $375 billion that is being blocked up right now, that wouldn't even be enough. But, obviously would be a first step. But even that first step is not being taken. But they continue saying it also follows Biden declining to declare a climate emergency. How the fuck are you not going to declare a climate emergency? What else do you want to see? I mean, we have record level heat waves in the UK, in the rest of Europe as well. We have heat waves right now across the United States. Our infrastructure is completely incapable of handling the stress of what climate change is putting on us right now. We have record amounts in terms of frequency and severity of hurricanes every single goddamn year now. Record levels of heat around the world every single year now. What do you want to see? I mean, what more would it take to possibly say that this is an emergency? But they say that it would allow him to institute a ban on crude oil exports, halt fossil fuel imports, and block investments in fossil fuel projects, among other things. Now, of course, if you say something like that, Republicans, conservatives are going to push back and they're going to say, oh my God, that's going to skyrocket energy prices here in the United States. Complete bullshit. If you actually wanted to lower energy prices for average working class Americans, you would nationalize our energy system. You would not allow a handful of multinational US-based fossil fuel corporations to artificially jack up their prices and price gouge the American people while they're making record profits in a moment like this. That's what you would actually do if you cared about lowering energy prices. And another thing that you could do to lower energy prices beyond just nationalizing our energy system would be to pass something like a windfall profits tax that somehow even the Tory right-wing government in the UK was able to do, but we somehow can't do that here in the United States. Or another thing that you could do would be passing climate legislation that involves investments in transitioning away from being dependent on fossil fuels in the first place. That is what it would mean to actually be energy independent. When Republicans come out and they say we need energy independence, they're talking about making the United States entirely dependent on those corporations who are price gouging the American people and driving a lot of the inflationary pressure that average working class people are facing right now. But they continue here saying the letter calls on Biden to immediately declare a climate emergency and end fossil fuel extraction on federal lands. Then, and most importantly, you must intervene in the stalled Senate negotiations. So I've talked about this before. There is a limitation in terms of what Joe Biden can do through the executive branch. Obviously, he can declare a climate emergency. He can shut down a lot of these fossil fuel projects. But in terms of actually meaningfully addressing the issue, you are going to have to pass something through Congress, which means you're going to have to get Senator Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and whoever wants to stand in the way. You're going to have to get them to fall in line, and you're going to have to do it right now, not in a couple of months, not after the November midterms when you lose the House and maybe barely hold on to the Senate. You need to do it right the fuck now. So they continue saying specifically the staffers are calling on Biden to send a public letter to Manchin giving him two options. And they say, quote, the first option must be for Senator Manchin to vote to pass the House Build Back Better climate justice provisions by the end of July as part of a reconciliation package. And they say the second must represent a bold and creative alternative that Senator Manchin understands to be much worse. In other words, threatening him. And they say, for example, you and Senator Schumer could strip Senator Manchin of his chairmanship of the Senate Energy and Natural Resource Committee, which is already fucking insane that this guy, Joe Manchin, who has a direct conflict of interest with not only his personal investments in the fossil fuel industry, but also the money that he receives from the fossil fuel industry more than any other senator in the entire country. The fact that Democrats decided to make this guy the chair of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee is fucking insane, and they should remove him even without this threat. They should just take him off regardless, but that would be something that could be a substantial threat to him, as he would probably see that as a direct threat to his own financial situation. But that's just one thing. They say they could also shut down the mountain Mountain Valley Pipeline project, which would hurt Manchin's prospects in West Virginia. And they say also eliminate the use of mountaintop removal and coal burning. He owns a coal company. And establish stringent water and air pollution standards. So those are some of the things that they could basically hold over Joe Manchin's head as leverage to get him to fall in line with these investments. But they continue saying this message to Biden comes 2 weeks after congressional staffers first sent a letter to Schumer and Nancy Pelosi demanding that they reach a deal to pass the clean energy tax credits, first reported by CNN. And they say just days after they sent that letter, Manchin told the Democratic leadership, after weeks of negotiations, really months, if not over a year of negotiations, that he would not support a reconciliation package that included climate spending. And of course, they say he soon hedged, saying that he would potentially support a broader package after the August recess if inflation seems to be abating. So he's just continuing to string them along and pretend, oh, just next month, just let's wait for the inflation reports. Complete and utter bullshit. We know Joe Manchin's arguments surrounding inflation are entirely bullshit, okay, for a number of different reasons. Number one, the main drivers of inflation, as I've been saying for months now, have been supply chain breakdowns. Thank you, neoliberalism and globalism, for exporting U.S. domestic manufacturing jobs overseas so that corporations could exploit cheap labor in countries like China. That's number one. And number two is corporate price gouging, okay? Just straight up theft from the American people to line the pockets of a lot of these wealthy oil and gas executives. So in terms of like inflation and Joe Manchin's concerns about inflation, entirely bullshit, okay? On top of that, we also know the data on this. We know the science, which they're about to talk about here in a second, shows that any investments in climate change that we make right now are going to pay for themselves, okay? Both in terms of mitigating the destructive costs of climate change and also in terms of like actual investments in renewable energy that will make money in the future and create millions of good paying jobs as well. So they continue here saying Manchin's concerns about inflation should ring hollow. Yep, there is an overwhelming consensus among economists that subsidizing clean energy would actually reduce inflation by making energy cheaper for consumers. And they say, summarizing the academic testimony to lawmakers, climate reporter David Wallace Wells noted in a recent column that, quote, the public health costs of air pollution are so high that total decarbonization would entirely pay for itself through the public health benefits alone. You don't even need to consider climate, in other words, for decarbonization to make sense, even according to the strictest cost-benefit analysis. Okay, so understand, even from the position of a capitalist ghoul like Joe Manchin, his opposition to climate initiatives don't even make any fucking sense. And again, you're talking about the strictest, narrowest scope of analysis in this cost-benefit analysis that he's putting forward here. You're just talking about the costs and consequences of air pollution. Okay, so that's not counting all of the other various, chemical pollutions and all of these other things that go into environmental destruction. Just on air pollution, total decarbonization of our economy would have a positive cost-benefit relationship with making those investments. I mean, completely ridiculous that anyone would even believe for a second that he actually cares about inflation or, the national debt or whatever. He's actively making those things worse while claiming that he's the one who's being reasonable and trying to, prevent worsening of inflation. Entirely bullshit. But finally, they finish off here saying, on the other hand, Manchin is a millionaire who has made his fortune in coal and has taken more campaign contributions from the oil and gas industry than any other senator, even other Republicans. And they say every year Manchin receives hundreds of thousands of dollars from a coal brokerage that he founded and which his son now runs. And if you want to go read a breakdown or watch my video that I covered on the specifics of his corruption within local West Virginia politics, that's a pretty interesting breakdown. But I mean, essentially, he created a coal company and basically price gouged his own constituents while he was a state senator within West Virginia for his own personal financial gain. So, not exactly somebody I would trust to be dictating the outlines of our climate agenda. But finally, they finish off here saying last Wednesday, Schumer confirmed that the Senate would move forward with a healthcare-only reconciliation bill, saying that they would make a renewed push for climate spending after July's inflation numbers are published. There is always a second reconciliation bill available to us, is what he told E&E News. So in other words, he's completely buying in to Joe Manchin's bullshit takes on inflation. Okay, he's saying, oh, we're going to wait for the inflation numbers, as if that has anything fucking to do with these climate investments. It's entirely nonsense. So, I mean, listen, I get that at this point, I notice it whenever I make these videos that I feel like I'm just running on a treadmill. I feel like I'm in the same spot, making the same exact arguments over and over and over again. But unfortunately, that's just a reflection of the reality of the situation that we're living in right now. I mean, it's a complete fucking joke. We're talking about, again, the single biggest issue, the single biggest threat facing humanity right now in climate change, and the reasons why we can't make adequate investments in tackling climate change, not just to mitigate the damage, but also to make investments for the future, are completely ridiculous. I mean, we have a single millionaire coal baron who is sitting on the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee for some goddamn reason, and he is getting to single-handedly dictate the outlines, the parameters, the timetable for when we're allowed to address the single greatest issue facing humanity. I mean, it's a complete fucking joke, just a reflection of how massively corrupt and rotten our government is. Not just that Joe Manchin is allowed to have personal vested financial stakes in the fossil fuel industry, but that he's able to receive hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations on an annual basis from the fossil fuel industry, that he's also allowed to sit in this position on the Senate Energy Committee, that he's also, not being confronted by other members of the Democratic establishment, that Joe Biden is not going out and doing a relentless offensive campaign against him, sending out that public letter, threatening him with removal from his committee positions, threatening to remove projects in West Virginia, or just going to his home state and doing rallies and just putting maximum pressure on him. So, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, in order to not have just a completely doomer mindset about something like climate change, this is going to take an all-hands-on-deck approach to this, okay? You need those insiders within the, halls of Congress putting pressure on their own bosses. You also need outside pressure, whether that's in the form of, protesting outside of their offices, whether it's in the form of attempting to shut down fossil fuel projects, even by force, if necessary sometimes. I mean, this is going to take an all-out approach, but there are no tactics, there are no investments in renewable energy, or no tactics revolving fighting for climate change investments that are going to outweigh or potentially be more damaging than the consequences of inaction.